Spouses who married the cool girl / boy from your high school, what are they like now? My mom was the cool girl all through high school, undergrad, grad school. But life didn't go that well. For most of her life, she had to be caring for someone in the family who was ill, and that took a huge toll on her. First it was her dad, then it was me. I had childhood illnesses, then her in-laws in quick succession, then her dad again, and finally she had to nurse my dad until he passed away from a terminal illness. She was meant to be social and have fun, and instead she was forced to be around sickness and sadness for her best years. But she is a very happy and mentally strong person in general who made the best of things. She hosted a lot of people and events. My house growing up was full of people visiting and having fun. She's very charming and easy to talk to and has a lot of fans all the time. Though, my siblings and I find her social side rather annoying. She isn't like that with us, and she tells us her charming side is just an act, and the real her is the lady who is constantly critical of us for our own good. She likes having groupies hanging around, people who are happy to take her help and be grateful to her. She has very few friends who could be considered her equals. She also expects a lot from other people and is constantly disappointed. She wants to be the center of everything. She doesn't know to be a guest at anything. She somehow ends up running every event she's invited to. She sincerely believes she's helping, but it's just disrespectful sometimes. And when we tell her that, she doesn't get it. She likes to dominate everything and make decisions for everyone. We joke that if the Prime Minister was her friend, she'd somehow end up running the country for him. I hate to be the one that bursts everyone's bubble, but my husband was the good-looking athletic guy with a great sense of humor that all of the girls adored. I was the petite blue-eyed blonde cheerleader that he chased for all 4 years in high school. We ended up getting together after high school graduation and were engaged 6 months later. I should have kept running from him like I did in school. He's now an addict who is verbally and emotionally abusive. He's a compulsive liar, and he's stolen prescription medication from me to get high. He's very jealous and has accused me of having an affair with every male I've ever worked with, all without any merit whatsoever. It got so bad at one point that he told me I needed to quit my job and stay home with my son. Then he criticized me for not having a job. I teach high school English, and he is jealous of my male students because he claims he sees the way they watch me and look at me. He's made my life hell. He criticizes and ridicules me for being a diabetic, saying he never intended to marry a cripple, which is hardly the case. I'm happy to say that he'll be getting served with divorce papers very soon. God help the woman who takes my place, because he can't do anything for himself. He's never paid a bill, made his own doctor appointments, etc. He's exhausting. He's also that guy who likes to tell our son what a stud he was in school and how he eventually got the girl he wanted. While dating, he portrayed himself to be the man he thought I would see as husband material. However, I quickly saw it was all an act shortly after we married. If I had it to do over, I would have left the country to avoid him. The only good thing to come out of our marriage is my son. I'm sorry that my story was the nightmare in the bunch. I'm just keeping it real. We are divorced now, but my ex-wife was a popular cheerleader in high school. I didn't even know much about her younger years when we were dating. I remember cracking up when she busted out a yearbook to show me. She said she loved high school and had a great time, had lots of friends, and ran with the popular kids. I was the total opposite. I hated those years of my life. I remember telling her that she probably would have disliked me if we had known each other as teenagers. I was a computer nerd that was into painting and graphic design. I was bullied a lot just for being socially awkward and super introverted. I was always carrying around and reading books instead of interacting with anyone. Anyway, the ex-wife isn't doing so well from what her current soon-to-be ex-husband told me. She had, and still has, a drinking problem when we divorced, but I got out relatively unscathed. She had a kid with this other guy a couple years ago and ended up getting a DUI, not her first. She lost her license and they ended up splitting up. Due to her alcoholism, he got an order of protection against her after several domestic disturbances where she got violent. He is still going through the court system, but he will likely get full custody of their kid because she has violated a couple orders of protection to come after him. She is on probation now too, which I think she has violated as well. Overall her life sounds like a mess. I feel bad for the guy because he is essentially me if I had decided to stay with her. I feel bad for her too because I know a lot of her issues are due to her dysfunctional childhood. We tried therapy twice, but she was quite hostile and resistant to it. I'm way late to the game, but I was the loser who married the prom queen. Dating was interesting because she came from a rich family that gave her everything she wanted. I grew up in a very poor family. We are talking 13 people in a 1-bathroom house. Poor. She went to house parties and did all kinds of crazy shit. Meanwhile I was home hanging out with my nerd friend watching Star Trek. I thought she was kinda snobbish, but turns out she's the kindest person you ever met. Her heart bleeds a little too easily actually. We moved in together and she had no concept of money. Her family didn't like her moving in with a guy before married. They really liked me minus the whole poverty thing and cut her off financially. Sink or swim baby. My friends warned me she'd be gone by the time the rent was due and we couldn't afford it. Instead she got her first job at a department store while in college full time and we cut back on everything. She still had a closet full of designer clothes and shoes, but didn't buy anything new for a long time. Stopped eating out every meal. She couldn't cook to save her life but I could, so we didn't go hungry. Overnight she became a normal college student. Common people is about her lol. She finished college. We put her through a law school. She made crazy money right after she graduated. I didn't make quite as much, but we were doing well for ourselves. Then the recession hit and we were back at square one. She stuck by me again through one of the worst times of my life. We had nothing. We had to move in with my, still poor, parents for 2 years to dig ourselves back out. We are not rich by any means, but we are doing well now. She still has her prom queen streak. She likes to dress up and buy nice things, but she now goes to thrift stores and garage sales and refuses to pay full price for anything. She got very good at DIYing stuff and made us a beautiful home filled with sheets she made herself, including furniture. I'm very happy. Friends warned me she would take off after college. When we went broke, she would cheat on me. She is way out my league looks wise, that she's not the kinda girl to stick around long. Turns out she's in this for life. We came close to splitting up a few times, but she always reeled us back in. I put her on a pedestal, which probably isn't good, but it works for us. People don't see it, but she does the same to me. She gets overwhelmed easily, but I'm pretty good at fixing shit when it goes bad. She still experiences things for the first time and it's really cool to see. For example, she saw an armadillo for the first time and she was crazy excited. She was never into nature lol. She stuck by me through some really dark times and I will never know why. I don't deserve her and she knows it. But I remember that every morning I wake up and try to do things that make me deserve her. Also I got to the gym, learned how to dress and do my hair because it sucks being the ugly skinny dude next to the hottest woman in the room. She still looks like she's out of my league, but at least it's not too bad now lol. She gets hit on a lot and I can tell it annoys her or sometimes makes her angry, but I could care less. Our kids adore her and so do my parents. My mom thinks she's helpless because she remembers back when she was helpless, but she's proud of her for how far she came. Now I'm tearing up thinking about it. My dad was a senior when my mom was a sophomore. My dad was practically Danny freaking Zuko. My mom was a total dork. She had awesome puffy curls, Coke bottle glasses and headgear to boot. My dad used to pay her to do his homework. My mom married a total piece of shit. She calls him her practice husband and had my brother for 2 years before becoming pregnant with me. She couldn't handle the trauma that he was putting them through and kidnapped my brother and ran away from sperm donor when she was still pregnant with me. She managed to get an apartment in the town she went to high school in. Every day was a struggle. One night she was having a particularly difficult time with my 3-year-old brother and 8-month-old self and ordered a pizza for dinner. When the pizza guy showed up, my brother was running around being an asshole and my mom threw little me into pizza guy's arms and said, "Will you hold this please?" While she proceeded to chase her 3-year-old around the apartment. This poor man is standing there with an infant in his arms in the middle of pure chaos. I've been told he fell in love with me right then and there, and my mom about 20 minutes later. I still have the pizza jacket he was wearing. They dated for 2 years before she finally agreed to marry him. They've been happily married for 28 years. He was working at the pizza chain that later became Domino's and going to school to become a teacher. DJ's Pizza was a side hustle while he was student teaching at the high school. He wanted to teach auto mechanics to help inspire troubled kids to stay in school so that they can go to college. He emancipated himself from his parents when he was 16, not because he was having trouble at home, but because he was ready to start building his life. He was taking classes at the community college by 17 years old. He was paying my mom to do his high school homework because he was too busy with college, apparently. I took his shop class when I was in high school. He was a strong advocate for high school being a waste of time lol. After finishing high school and community college, he graduated from the University of Michigan and went back to community college to continue taking classes for many years. He has so many diplomas and degrees that I can't even keep track. My mom too. Thanks to his influence he saved us. He married my mom when I was 2 years old and adopted my brother and I when I was 8. And when they had enough money we moved out of the slums to the upper middle class suburbs of Chicago where he taught auto at a very prestigious high school. When my brother and I were on our own and the suburbs sucked him dry of all joy and passion for what he was doing, they moved back to Michigan. They now live in total paradise on 80 acres of land in the woods with their 3 dogs. He has his own shop in the barn behind the house and he's teaching auto at the local community college. He and my mother are very happy living the lives they built for themselves. Apparently his shop teacher inspired him and somehow convinced him that he could make his life into whatever he wanted it to be, and he made it his goal to be that inspiration for kids. He is now living the life that he wanted to live and doing exactly that. My parents were both the coolest kids in school, both prom queen and prom king. My dad football captain. Sometimes when I was a kid my mom would pull out their high school yearbook and show me, and I would be so upset because I thought that I wouldn't be as cool or popular as them when I was in school. They both grew up decently wealthy too, but they didn't really do anything, so I grew up poor in a trailer park. It literally wasn't until I was in my almost late 20s before I realized that they were faking losers living in the past. My whole life I just thought that they had life figured out and they chose to be like this. They got married after high school with no plan for the future. Had their kids lived in a trailer my entire life until I was a senior in high school, then decided to buy a house in the suburbs right when I left for college. I really haven't talked to them since. They also spent my childhood telling me that it was my fault and my brother's fault for us being there because we didn't clean up the house enough, or we didn't get good grades, or whatever. Since they got their new house they both working decent jobs, so I just hope they have a big inheritance. But besides that they faking ruined the first 20 years of my life. It's nice everybody's talking about how their parents or relatives adjusted well, but my mom still talks about how cool my dad was in high school and she's literally almost 60. It faking sucks. I married the hot girl from school. She was an absolute nightmare. We had 3 kids together, then she started fooling around behind my back, so I left her. Was seeing the kids a couple of times a week and they'd stay with me at the weekend each week. All was well until I started dating someone else. Then she flipped her sheet and had the nerve to tell me I should stay single in case she changed her mind. I shit you not. I laughed at her and told her hell would be a cold place before that ever happened. Then she started playing games. She'd take the kids out when I was supposed to pick them up. I'd have them in a Friday night straight from school and take them back Saturday night. She decided to go away for the weekend without telling me, knowing that it was my new girlfriend's birthday on the Saturday, so I couldn't take the kids back. We made the best of the situation and the kids went out for a meal with us, and we all had a great time, which pissed the ex off even more. The following Friday I went to get the kids from school and was told they weren't in school that day. Went to the ex's place to be told by the neighbors that she'd moved away. All this without a single mention to me or the kids. Took me 5 years to track down that crazy beach because every time someone would ask about them, she'd find out and move again. Then one week I was off work after having an operation and went shopping with the new girlfriend. I was sitting outside a shop having a cigarette when a teenage girl comes up and asks me if my name is insert name. So I say yes. She says I thought it was and walks away. I thought it strange, so I watched where she went. She walked back to my two oldest kids that were missing. So I jumped up and held out my arms and got probably the best hugs I've ever gotten. I found out she'd been telling them for 5 years that I didn't want them. Now I had a new girlfriend. They were living in a homeless shelter 35 miles away from me. This was on a Friday afternoon. I got a phone call that evening saying she'd thrown them out of their room and they didn't know what to do. Knowing my devious ex, I called the police and explained the situation to them, and he said to pick them up and call to the station, and he talked to the kids to make sure they were going of their own free will. We went to the station and asked for the sergeant I'd spoken to and took a seat to wait. He came out to see the kids all cuddled up to me and said I don't even need to ask if they're happy to go with you. I can see from the way they are that they're happy to. He just asked what had happened that day and gave me his business card and wished us good luck. That's my tale of woe about the hot girl from school. I married the popular guy. We are years apart however, and went to different schools. He was the athlete, stupidly handsome, great physique, and the guy all the girls wanted to be around and all the guys wanted to be friends with. I, on the other hand, was bullied horrible in school because I was poor and didn't fit into my mom's hand-me-down clothes very well. I was a size 0 and my mom was a 4XL. It didn't matter if I was pretty underneath. I was poor. After leaving home, I was able to afford Macup, clothes that fit, and proper hygiene products. When I met my husband, we became friends immediately. He always had some hot girl in his phone and he loved me boosting his ego. I loved his smile, his charm, those eyes. One day he turned those eyes onto me, and I still don't believe it. For years I thought him being attracted to me was just an ultimate prank. I mean, I have seen and met the women he dated. They were always perfectly tanned and polished, well manicured, good family backgrounds, perfect teeth, sunglasses that cost more than my rent. I think he broke a lot of hearts the day he proposed to me. Sometimes I feel like I still get snide looks at the bar from some women when all he does is brag about his beautiful bride when he is approached. He is so innocent about it too. Girl approaches and engages in conversation and he is like, oh my god, you would love my wife. I think y'all would get along so fantastically. You should play some pool with us. Where is she? Points to me. I get dirty look and they leave. Followed by those looks for the rest of the night. I have to tell him he was being hit on, and he seems super confused, like he doesn't believe it. My favorite thing about him is that he constantly reminds me that I'm the most beautiful woman he has ever met in his life. Less his mother. I think she is a model type of woman too. He tells me that so much that at times I even catch myself believing him. I mean, I have seen his track history and the type he attracts, so I know his taste. He calls me his trophy wife in a loving and playful way. I think he likes the fact that I'm good with money. He was shocked when he realized that he looks just as good in those $20 shades from the gas station as he does in a $400 pair of Ray-Bans. I refuse to buy soda because tea is better for your health and still has sugar and caffeine in it. We both give and share out of love alone and can communicate easily about anything and everything. He's charming and I'm sweet, the perfect pair. Not quite what the op was asking, but I was a nerdy kid, skinny, 5 feet 11L, 130 pounds, with little to no self-confidence. I married a girl that was a bit nerdy too, kind of quiet and awkward. We didn't go to the same school or live in the same city. Now we are both in our late 30s, and I guess we aged well. Because people say we look very good at our age, we are no longer shy or nerdy. It's nice having good looking women my age who now find me very attractive and compliment me. I definitely didn't have that going on in high school. In my 20s I guess I became more outgoing and learned to mingle with the ladies better, became more confident, etc. I now have a beard too, and everyone says it suits me better than being clean shaven. A few years ago, I attended a friend from high school's wedding. His sister was the popular girl in the school. Every guy wanted her. She could have whoever she wanted. When I saw her at the wedding, now in her late 30s, she's aged horribly and looks like she has drug problems. You can tell by her mouth. Her teeth look like they have pipe burns from smoking hard drugs. It was quite sad to see her like that. I definitely hope she gets help. She has no husband or boyfriend. I noticed that the nerdy, geeky and awkward girls from my high school are now the attractive ones, have successful lives, etc. Funny how life works. My spouse was the prom queen and star of our volleyball team. She was offered athletic and academic college scholarships. She also modeled as a young woman. Because of that, and how teenage minds work, she had her fair share of haters who thought she must be arrogant. 20 years later, and she has been awarded our city's Citizen of the Year, Volunteer of the Year, and also Business of the Year, twice. She took over our town's homeless shelter and food bank / soup kitchen, and turned them from a rinky-dink setup into a absolute machine. She has incorporated job training, education and mental health and physical health improvement, and a full drug and alcohol rehabilitation. She also started a cooking school, and opened a restaurant, and tied the soup kitchen and homeless shelter into it. So often homeless people were getting meals cooked by professional chefs. She has incorporated all these to work together. She has a restaurant that a homeless person, or somebody down on their luck, can come in and eat a meal for free. They can turn in their clothes, where they are and through a washer and dryer. They can take a shower, and leave with another sack meal. Their clothes are clean, any toiletries they need, and any clothing items as well. The awesome thing is that her businesses pay for 90% of it. We aren't depending on government money. I mention that because sometimes people will make a rude comment, why are my tax dollars paying for all this? We funded Point, so that girl that people thought was a typical high school beauty queen with no brains, degree from a major college, and has made our city infinitely a better place to live. Her work has improved the lives of thousands of people. Moral of the story: don't judge a book by its cover. My mom was the popular athletic, homecoming queen, outgoing girl in high school. She had a ton of friends. The day before her high school graduation, she was T-boned by a semi while driving across a busy intersection. That accident put her into a coma for 11 days. She had to relearn how to walk, read, write, etc. Her boyfriend she had been with since freshman year dumped her for her friend. No one came to visit her after the accident with the exception of 2 to 3 good friends. After high school she was engaged to a physically abusive man. Eventually she was able to escape that relationship and met my dad. They got pregnant with me on accident at 27 years old. My dad's parents, conservative and Catholic, told them they needed to get married, so they did. They were married when my mom was about 7 months pregnant with me. My younger sister was born almost 2 years after me. They were married for 4 to 5 years then divorced. My dad ended up buying her out of the house they shared. She moved back in with her parents. She went to school for massage therapy and was really enjoying working in that field, then got arthritis. She has trouble holding down a job because she has a permanent brain injury from her accident that hinders her decision making and impulse control. She's also on a ton of medications. Constant headache all day every day. Luckily she just reconnected with an old friend from school who she started dating. She's really happy and I'm happy for her. She wasn't handed an easy life. She's still the same outgoing and happy lady though through it all. We didn't go to the same school, but our high school lives couldn't have been more different. My husband was gorgeous, star football and track and field player. He also wrestled, but was very average at that. Extremely popular, through the type of parties that are on those teen movies, and got invited to all the ones he didn't host. Everyone knew him, girls swarmed him, though he was too ignorant to notice. He's featured in several pages of his yearbook all 4 years. In other words, stereotypical popular jock, except my husband was kind and made straight A's on top of all of it. I was chubby, a loner. I never dated because I was already in a relationship with my classes, books, and grades. Was hardly ever interested in boys and they certainly weren't interested in me. Constantly in the library. Despite being an extrovert, I had a hard time making friends and connecting with people. I was on good terms with most everyone. I just didn't have friends or belong to any groups or cliques. My husband says he thinks I'm beautiful in my high school pictures, but I certainly don't think so. I'd say I was average. The only place I'm in the yearbook is those mandatory student ID pics. I still to this day don't understand why my husband fell in love with me. He's still hot AF and makes friends everywhere he goes. Everyone loves him and he gets along with everyone. I'm sarcastic as hell, don't care much for people and still prefer to study and read over going to parties and socializing. I'm average at best in the looks department. My husband just says he took one look at me and that was it. The stars aligned, the universe shifted, and he was madly in love. Maybe he got one of those concussion diseases from playing football or something. I don't know. But I'm very pleased with him and intend to keep him around as long as he wants me. I dated the most popular guy after he graduated and I was still a senior in high school. We dated for 4 years. I broke up with him because after 4 years he never proposed. I figured, rightly, that he never would. He would borrow my car, then bring it back late, which made me late for work. Then he'd say, when we are married you won't need a job, so being late is no big deal. Since he never proposed, after 4 years of getting written up and close to getting fired regularly, plus this kept me from getting decent raises, directly reference the regular lateness in the reviews, I finally realized I was being strung along and ended it. He went out and bought a new truck right after that. He was just sticking around to use my stuff and get the free setch. I lasted that long because I really wanted this relationship to work. Unfortunately I was the only one making any effort in the end, and it was just obvious that he had no respect for me or my efforts to hold things together. He called me about 5 months later wanting to know if we could still have sex even though we weren't together as a couple. Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. I said no. That was the last conversation I had with him. It's pretty clear he was never going to work out. Fortunately, because of awesome birth control I never let him knock me up. My one simple rules was, no wedding, no babies. Due to the miracle of the internet, decades later I was able to piece together what happened to him. He had 2 kids with the next girl after me he eventually got with. He never married her either. He was well behind on back child support, so he couldn't afford the kids he had with her, and she spent most of their childhood trying to get him to pay child support. He sued his own grandfather over some petty thing and lost. The judge sided with the grandfather. He had to pay his grandfather's lawyer's fees as well as his own lawyer's fees. He loaded up on debt and lost the free house his grandmother, other side of the family from grandfather he sued, left him. That house today would be valued easily 600, 700k, and it was his, free and clear. She and her husband bought it in the late 40s for very little. The taxes on it were maybe 1k/year due to Prop 13. That house, which is in what became a fashionable part of town, cost very little to live in, less than my small apartment in the suburbs. The city says he owes them utility bills adding up to around 3k. He didn't pay his utility bills in the free house his grandmother gave him. He kept trying to create small businesses and then made terrible business decisions. He'd lose that money and try again and again. Eventually last year he declared bankruptcy. He had a CH13 get converted to CH7. That means that the debt restructuring didn't work out. Essentially you have to make the payments in the payment plan the judge lays out. He couldn't do it, so he couldn't protect the assets that might have been shielded in a CH13. I suspect that wasn't his first time, but I can't find any records for previous bankruptcy proceedings. They may not be online. I could go on and on, but he turned out to be a train wreck and a half. I divined all of this from online resources. Even the court records with testimony etc. were online, as were the bills and the property records. I had to know if I'd made a huge mistake. I hadn't. The huge mistake was choosing him in the first place. But I recovered eventually. I don't think he ever will. My wife and I are the queer version of this. She was the extremely popular jock in high school who was secretly faking all the football players' girlfriends and doing lots of drugs. I was the smart girl who never stepped out of line and didn't even mess around with anyone until I was 17. We met in our early 20s when she was at the height of popularity in our urban lesbian/queer scene, hitting up all the dance parties and breaking all the hearts. Met at a dance party which I went to only as my roommate's wingman. I sat at the bar reading a book and now wife came up to me to tease me. I'm fairly conventionally attractive, but definitely not popular and way too reserved to ever stand out in any way. She's an extreme extrovert. Literally in our first conversation I said to her, wow, I could never date you. What I didn't know, when I met her, and she started aggressively pursuing me, was that she'd been in and out of rehab 4 times already for speed and heroin addictions. Didn't figure out the full extent of it until 2 years into our relationship. The next few years were a lot of chaos as she started making some of the same mistakes. Our early few years together had stabilized her a lot, but one person can never be your only lifeline. Now I think that seeing me reading at the club that night was like a sign to her that the chaotic and extreme life she'd been living for a while was way too much for her and was going to kill her eventually. But it took a few years for her to figure out exactly what it would actually mean to get out of that trap and sober up. She ended up going to rehab again and is now 6 years sober. We got married, have a kid, and I'm about to pop with kid #2. Both have great jobs. She's a director at a national organization. We bought a house in our urban area, and all our friends now are other queer families. Great life honestly. I think she's the smartest and most honest person I know. I taught her how to be stable and grounded and confident without being wildly out of control. She taught me how to not take myself too seriously and loosen up a bit. I'll go to the occasional queer dance party now without a book. I was the cool kid in high school. Captain of the football team. Dated the prom/homecoming queens. etc. It got serious with one, and we were high school sweethearts for 2 years. Turns out she was a hoe, and was secretly seeing others behind my back. I was heartbroken, and loved her deeply. Broke up my senior year. She was a junior, and went off to college in the fall. A few months into college she contacted me to reconcile our relationship. Being an idiot I got back with her. It lasted about 3 months and she went back to her old ways. I stayed single for most of college until I met a girl back home during summer break. She was 9 months pregnant at the time, but I didn't care. She was funny and beautiful. We talked here and there as I was still in school. Over time we got more serious and eventually married. Still married to this day with 3 kids. Funny thing is, even though we went to different high schools we had crossed paths many times. Before dating. She stayed in the hotel room right next to mine during senior year spring break. She was a little chunky then and got sun poisoning, so her face was all puffy, but she was in our room every day since we were the cool kids with the keg. We talked here and there, but didn't make a connection until later in life. The cheerleader girlfriend from high school ended up a school teacher and got big. My wife doesn't work as I graduated with a computer science degree and make enough for both of us, and we decided we don't need a second income, but rather a parent to always be there for the kids. Had a friend in high school who was the cool guy everybody wanted to be around. Drove a sports car. Came from a good family. His older brother and younger sister both went to Ivy League schools. He was smart, athletic and a talented artist. He dated the hot, rich and popular girl in our class. He was also one of the cool drug kids in our class. The guy you would smoke weed with at all the parties, or you would show up and he would be all faked up on something. He ended up following the girl to the same university after graduation. It was very obvious she didn't want to continue their relationship in college and didn't want him there. But he still went. She dumped him immediately upon arrival at college. He lasted a semester. Couldn't handle the freedom. He never went to class. Drank all day every day. Failed out and moved back to our town. He then went to the large state school where me and some other friends went that was close to where we were from. He failed out of there within a year. Then went to a branch campus of my university with some other friends from high school, but he failed out there also. Then he went to a local community college and failed out of there as well. It's like he was falling down a ladder and hitting every rung on the way down. All throughout this time he was still the drug guy partying with the townies from our hometown that never went to college. They all still loved him and thought he was the coolest. This continued for a few years. We were all graduated from college at this point and would see him when we went home for Thanksgiving or Christmas. He was still the same old party guy. He had moved on to a hefty opioid and alcohol addiction at this point. People tried to help him and get him to go to rehab, which he did, and somewhat cleaned up his life, but he relapsed a few times. He was driving home one night and he crossed over the lane divider and had a head-on collision, killing the other driver and landing him in the hospital with serious injuries. Didn't end up in jail. Imagine that, a white guy from a somewhat well-off family faces no consequences. He claimed he was tired and he fell asleep at the wheel. So he now has a lot of physical problems resulting from his injuries. So he's given opioids to manage his pain. And wouldn't you know it, his drug problem gets worse. He moved to Austin for some reason. Couldn't hold a job there. So he had to move back to his parents' house. At this point, most of us that graduated had either moved or lost touch with the local folks from our town. About 4 years ago I got a text from one of our high school friends letting me know about his funeral. From what I gather he either overdosed or killed himself, or both. It's a sad ending to a guy who was given every opportunity in the world, but couldn't get out of his own way. My dad was the class clown and hugely popular because of it. He was also a star athlete. He played soccer and tennis, incredibly intelligent. He speaks like 4 languages, and was a professional translator for a while, and apparently got into street fights and illegal drag racing on the side. He came to America to study, intending to only be here until he finished his degree. My mom was a huge nerd. Her sister was the pretty one who was prom queen and stuff. She was the nerd. I've seen pictures of her in high school and honestly I think she was prettier than my aunt. My aunt had huge glasses as a kid, but my mom was also very shy. Her parents didn't go to college, so when she went she had no guidance. Hugely smart, but no idea what to apply it to. She ended up doing 2 undergrad degrees and finishing her master's in 1 year. She also apparently had 50 boyfriends before she met my dad, which seems utterly nutty to me. My parents met in their PhD program, and according to my mom, they were literally making up awards for my dad because he kept breaking records. He was also wildly popular, even among the American students. They dated for 7 years, so they could both finish their degrees first and wait for my aunt to get married, since family tradition says the younger sister can't marry before the elder. My mom is a college professor. My dad is a school tech administrator. My dad got fat the second he stopped smoking and exercising every day. That is when he had kids. My mom is still a tiny little skinny fairy. My dad gives my mom advice about to deal with crap in her job. Since he's so socially minded he can guess exactly how each person will react without even meeting them, and normally she'd be too shy to say anything. They sometimes get into huge fights, and have since I was a kid, but they are still married after 20+ years, so they can't hate each other entirely. Got 2 for this. My grandfather was the slickest dude in school, went on to be a mellowed out charmer in a small Mississippi town. Started a construction company and bought some land down there. He passed a few years back but everyone in the town, even those who never met him, know his name and respect our family for it. Granted he was the saint in the family and he and my mother were the only 2 to ever be considered respected out of all of us. I think people kind of feel that towards me as well, but not like they did towards them. My younger brother too. He raised a good daughter who raised 2 good kids and a dud and a half. We have stories that the whole town knows that are now legends down there, all about his wit and exploits from when he was young. He didn't ever just coast along on his reputation. He garnered respect from his actions. Basically went from his hometown hero to the working class hero of his new town. After Katrina he nearly single-handedly saved the town from going under because he would do work at cost or less and accept flexible payments in order to save his friends from losing everything. You can still visit the boulevard in the town, and mentioning our name gets you stories for hours about one of his funny stories or jokes, or about how he saved a business. He was a truly great man. My great uncle, granddad's brother-in-law, served in Vietnam and Korea. He went from a quiet yet sharp playboy in school to an honorable soldier. Now he's in his late 70s and just posted on Facebook about how he's sad that he can't travel to geosurfing. He's goddamn immortal, I swear. He taught himself to skateboard in his 30s, surf and snowboard in his 40s. Now he's a retired engineer who travels half the year to do adrenaline junkie type shit and has a huge family that are all good people. Despite being the oldest man in the room, he's also one of the most progressive in his family. His kids will say something somewhat racist or homophobic or bigoted in some way and he'll shut them down. Says that everyone's blood runs red except for fascists. He and his wife are the glue that holds his family and extended family together. I don't idolize many people, but those two men are true legends. I started dating one of the cool girls my last year of high school. She was very down to earth, not stuck up at all, and we had a long relationship, lived together for 10 years, got engaged. In the end, she left me for a guy she met at work. Now she is miserable, and the guy is a serious alcoholic. I'm still close friends with her, and I'm really sad her life went that way. Our breakup was 11 years ago, so I haven't had feelings for her in a long time, but I've been single ever since. I'm 40 now, and I think I might be alone the rest of my life. I'm a good looking guy, have 2 degrees, work as a teacher, but the one romance I had in the last 11 years ended disastrously, and I got my heart broken even worse than when my fiancé left me. I would love to find someone, but I'm kind of old school. I found that dating apps haven't worked for me. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. I don't know. It's all about making yourself into a brand and I don't know how to do that. It really sucks because I miss having a life partner so much, a confidant and partner in crime. When you don't have a partner or close friends/family, I found that you can feel really untethered from the world. You start to feel that your life is meaningless because there is no one to bear witness, just as you are not there to bear witness to another person's life and accept them for all that they are. Besides that, life is really hard for many people my age in this day and age in a financial sense. We were just starting to build our lives when the Great Recession happened, and in my country the cost of housing makes it almost impossible for me with my paltry salary to actually have an independent life. So I left the city and moved in with my aging mom. That doesn't help me find a life partner because I'm perceived as a failure by society, and in some ways I am. As a result, that sense of being completely untethered overwhelms me with feelings of isolation that is terrifying. It's like falling endlessly with nothing to grab onto and no idea where I will land. I know I have a lot to offer someone, but how would they ever know that when we are always judged by appearance and the image/brand we create for ourselves? I know that there are so many people in the same position for similar or different reasons, and that we have faced failure despite doing everything we were told to do. We look around and see that some of our friends have good lives and happy families. Some are just getting by and others are even worse off than us. I wish there was a way people like us could find each other. Was not the most popular boy, but created a good boy image and was favorite student of all my teachers throughout school and college. Had a saint-like persona among my friends and they believed I never lied. They used to come to me for conflict resolution and would accept my decision. Was really good at maintaining friendship. They would confide their darkest secret to me. I was, and am, the therapist for a lot of my friends. Was the dream son-in-law of all the aunties in my community. I'm from South India. And was the dream husband of all the girls there. Don't drink, don't smoke, no bad friendship, no fights, always loving and caring when talked to. Married a really good looking, fair-skinned girl. Yes, when it comes to arranged marriage, the criteria was that I get to see her once and talk to her once. So, basically randomly select one. So, looks and fair skin was the only criteria. I was dumb then. Thought fair skin is beauty. Since then, my life has been in a hole 15 plus years and I don't see any end to it. Point lessons learned. Point never be too arrogant. Because of my sainthood thing and the therapist thing and my ability to be friends with anyone and everyone, I really thought any girl would be happy with me. I thought I could make it with anyone. So, I succumbed to society's pressure of marrying a girl of their choice. Well, I was wrong. Even today, I'm likable in my friend and work circle. People talk to me their personal things. But I found out spouse is a completely different thing. Point grow some backbone. If you go to a market to buy some tomatoes, you don't randomly pick the 5 that you saw first. You touch and feel them. You check if they will serve the purpose. In fact, you check them if they will serve your purpose. And if there is not enough of what you want, you don't buy. Do the same when selecting a partner. Don't be under pressure from society and parents that you need to pick one from the 5 photos they showed you. and be ready to say no. Never stop smiling. I start my day smiling and end my day smiling. Whatever shit happens in between, I never stop smiling. Didn't I say I'm a therapist to my friends? Now, I'm my own therapist. You will never see me angry, frustrated or sad. My friends think I have the best life. Approximately 40 more years to go before I die. Lot of smiling to do. I didn't marry the guy, but went on a date with him. It was the most awkward date I have ever been on too. It started with him meeting me at my job. When I approached him after my shift was over, he had his back to me, and his elbow was furiously moving in a motion that I swore looked like he was jerking off right there at me. I hesitantly tapped him on the shoulder. He turned to me, smiled, and said, "Hello, I brought you something," and proceeded to hand me the half-scratched lottery ticket he had been working on. We went to a restaurant, which was decent, then to see Jackass the movie. Yes, it was a while ago. During the movie, he was so loud when expressing his disbelief that those guys would be doing such crazy things. He was so loud that people were laughing more at him than the movie. After that, we went to a store to get some things for his Halloween costume. As we walk through the parking lot, he wraps himself around me, and I ask what he is doing. He says he saw a guy looking at me and thought he was going to try to do something to me. There is a tiny, old as dirt, man with a cane walking out of the store. As we walk, I suddenly feel his hand in my coat pocket, along with mine. I remove it and ask what he thinks he's doing. He says, I was just joking." I told him I don't have a sense of humor, so the joke was lost on me. We get into the store, and my brain shuts him out as he starts talking about almost getting hit metal on his crotch at work. Then something about Superman underwear that is hanging on the rack. Next thing I know, he has me by the shoulders, turns me around, and has his face just a few inches away from mine. He asks, "Do you think I'm attractive?" I said, "Definitely not this close to my face." And he moved away. On the way to my house, he is talking about his ex-wife and how she is in prison for theft. He breaks what he is saying to ask if he can come in and watch a movie at my house. I say I haven't been home in a few days and I'm not sure what shape I left my house in. He says, "That is alright. It's not your house I'm in love with." I told him he is not in love with me, and again, he was just joking. When we got to my house, he picked a movie and sat down on the couch. I sat at the other end. He moved closer and asked if we could cuddle, to which I replied that I'm not a cuddler. Before I knew what was happening, he had his head in my lap and was hugging a throw pillow. I jumped up to the arm of the couch, which he didn't even seem to notice. He just laid there, looking up at me, and said, "By the way, this is how I lay when I text you." I said cool. He told me his brain was getting tired and asked if he could crash on my couch for the night. I said okay, but he had to be gone in the morning when I went to get my daughter from my parents' house. When the movie was over, I locked all of the doors. When I locked the last one, I heard something behind me. It was him. He just stood there and said, "I'm following you around like a lost little puppy." I told him that I realized that and went to grab him a blanket and pillow. As I went to my room to grab them, I thought how stupid it was of me to not shut my bedroom door behind me. Before I could, though, he was standing in the doorway. Then he shouted, "Oh my god," and leapt from the doorway onto my bed, where he proceeded to act like he was swimming in my blankets. He yelled at me. I changed my mind. "I'll take the couch and I get your bed." I told him to get the hell out of my bed and walked him to my bedroom door. Shoving the pillow and blanket at him, I shut the door in his face. He stood outside it for a good 10 seconds before saying goodnight and informing me that he took the next day off work so we could spend all day together. I told him I was busy the next day. He asked what I had planned, and I told him it was personal and none of his business. The next morning, I got up to go get my daughter, and he was still there. I told him he had to go. When I came back with my daughter, he was still there. I told him again that he had to go. My daughter and I got ready for the memorial service we were going to, and my dad came to pick us up. When the two of us walked out into my living room, he was still there. He looked between the two of us for a few seconds before asking, "Are you going somewhere?" I told him we were, and he needed to leave finally. This time, I walked him out of the house, so I knew he left. Lol. We are still friends, but we don't hang out, after he begged me the next time to please look at his wiener. He drifted from job to job, always unbelievably great jobs for a college dropout of and at one time a VP of a bank, and was recommended for bank president of the bank till he told me God called me to be a massage therapist at a casino. Always quit everything because he was smarter / knew better / wasn't appreciated enough. That included jobs, the Air Force, didn't make it through basic training, social clubs, friendships, then our marriage and practically fatherhood. Now, 15 years later, he's married to an alcoholic who was arrested for forging prescriptions and teaches, though not at reputable career colleges, but out there of his home, massage therapy. He has no friends and has very little contact with one daughter and none with the other at all. He has spent his life thinking people owed him for the pleasure of being friends. He spent years telling me he was better / smarter / better looking than him, and I stayed way longer, 18 years, than I should have, because I believed it. Whereas now, I'm single by choice, have way more than dates than I want to accept. I have a small close-knit group of loyal friends. I have worked at the same school as a gifted teachers for 28 years, and have my master's degree. I have a super close relationship with my 1 daughters and their husbands, and often babysit my 3 grandkids, 9, 3, 1, and my daughters refuse to go on our yearly vacation to Walt Disney World vacation without me. I told my daughters they should pick out the nerdy guys, because they usually turn out to be very good looking when they are older, and they are the ones with the great jobs as adults. I wouldn't say either were nerdy during their dating time, but they weren't good looking / popular. Now one is a nurse practitioner and the other has a Monday-Friday truck driving job, and both do well. Even better, I brought my daughters up to be able to support their kids themselves. They are both nurse practitioners. My fiance won't admit it, but he was kinda popular in high school. He fit in with every crowd, never got picked on, and was a star player on his tennis team, while also being a hella active Eagle Scout and having Ivy League colleges scout him. I never met him in high school, but from what I'm told he was incredibly muscular, but very awkward. He never realized when people hit on him, which is alert, because today he looks like he was blessed by the gods themselves. He never really dated, and he was hounded by colleges at the end of his high school career, and almost went to Cambridge, but decided against it to travel for a year. Typical hot, top of his class, athletic man. I have no clue how I landed him. I was the picked on kid in my high school, with really low grades, but still very smart, acing tests but not doing homework. I had a severe eating disorder and have body dysmorphia. I came from the neglected house and the insane family that left me awkward, skittish, and bipolar as fuck. I was just the kid nobody liked. Has 22 now and a bit heavy after a hernia, though has losing weight. He likes to pretend he's a Viking in his off time, foraging, forging, and being pagan as fuck. He is still insanely hot, to the point where I can't stop blushing when I look at him. Well above my league. Currently he is going to college for being a conservation officer. He loves the life we have now, where it's mostly just us keeping to ourselves. We are planning to have a kid soon, because he wants to be a dad more than anything in this world. Has still amazing. Just now has introverted and much happier. When I was a kid, one of my best friends was insanely popular. She was so freaking drop dead gorgeous. Stunning. Honestly, I can't believe a single human could look that good. But she wasn't actually popular because of how she looked. She was popular because, as beautiful as she was 3,937,362,929 times more kind. She is like a made-up movie character. What a saint. She took little, nerdy, frizzy-haired me under her wing and fiercely protected me from my bullies. Except, she barely had to say anything, because damn girl with that ass, you couldn't fight back. She had the most beautiful dark skin I've ever seen. So dark, it looked like a painting. Her body was probably -2% fat. She would actually be a good supermodel, tall, lean, and goddamn, so beautiful. Her hair was always awesome, whatever she did to it. but her face was so pretty, and it looked kind. You ever see someone with a face and you just know they are safe? That was my friend. I'm grateful to have had her when I needed a friend so badly. Unfortunately we kind of fell out of touch, but I keep tabs on her on Facebook and say hello every now and then. She is now a registered nurse, dresses to kill, continues to surround herself with a diverse group of friends, thank goodness, or I wouldn't have had a chance to be in her circle. Who all seem so interesting and smart, and she just uses happiness. I honestly do not understand how she is a real human. She is just so good and warm-hearted. And now she's basically saving tons of lives and nurturing people. Man, YAA was the shit. Love that girl. She was my first friend who was like a sister to me. Her family loved on me, and obviously mine loved on her. She took care of their daughter, and was also really freaking cool, nice, and smart. What a phenomenal human being. I'm not married to her obviously, but I really admire her. Excellent character. I like hearing stories about popular people who didn't suck, so I decided to share my story about her. Not really the cool guy or athletic stories here, but here point my dad went from being an overall great student in high school to a god in academics in college. And he came from at that time, a relatively economically backward rural area. So this is an rags to riches story. Point after his first year of high school he opted for a 3-year diploma instead of continuing the next 2 years of high school. So while most people at 19 were getting settled into the second year of college, he already had a diploma in hand. He later went on to complete 2 bachelor's degrees, structural and civil engineering, and 1 master's degree, civil engineering. He wasn't the shy nerdy guy either. You know that one guy in college who was absolutely terrifying to talk to, often got into clashes with the teachers and staff? Yeah, that was my dad, but he wasn't what you'd call athletic, but he did participate in a few sports. He married my mom in 2001. They met when he came back to visit his parents after his second bachelor's degree, and was staying back for a couple of months. Despite his qualifications he was stuck working a dead-end, private sector job for almost 3 years. At one point they were so poor that for all the schematics that my dad drew up were done by hand as he couldn't afford a computer. He also worked up to 2 to 3 jobs. In 2003 he applied for a government job, and guess what, he was hired. This new job was like almost half the hours, had a metric fuck ton of benefits, paid more than 3 of his previous jobs combined, to the point where 1 month of salary at his new job was equal to almost 4 months of salary he got from working 3 jobs previously. Now, well, he's 48, healthy, still works for the government, has his own big ass home in one of the major cities of the country, earns 8x more than he'd ever thought he'd earn, is currently building a farm in the countryside to retire to, and is all set to send his kid abroad for business school abroad a few years down the line. Point I absolutely fucking love my parents. My beloved sister, fun Aunt Lauren to my children, had a long line of interested sweeties as a high schooler. She never had to really do anything difficult or challenge herself, because in addition to being conventionally attractive, she's also whip smart. She was homecoming queen and the rest of the things that come with her status in high school. Point dudes always fell all over themselves for the opportunity to date her. We did not benefit from even mediocre parenting, so we figured out life ourselves, and with some assistance from the greatest grandfather ever. That said, she had grown accustomed to getting what she wanted. Point she got to college and kept coasting, and had a friend group that included many dudes who did whatever she asked and were along for the ride. Except one. She asked him one day why he didn't like her. They remember his response slightly differently, but the message was, he told her he didn't find it endearing or likable for someone of her intelligence to coast by. She was venting about it to my wife and realized it pissed her off because he was right. She did however find it endearing that he didn't give a fuck about impressing her. 3 months after her residency, I walked her down the aisle because Gramps wasn't with us anymore. Point today, the cool girl from high school is Dr. Lauren, pediatrician, mom to 3 bundles of energy, and married to the type of person I never thought she would be with. He grounds her, and she brings out the fun part of him. Hey, this is me and my wife. We met in our early 30s, but in high school she was a hardworking, straight A's, beloved by all, class president. I was an introverted, brooding, underachieving outsider. Heh. She's very sensitive and very emotionally perceptive, and always available for anyone who needs it. She's the 9th of May 10 socially skilled, but the combination of caring and generosity really costs her. Early in life, she internalized her parents' expectation or demand to be an ultra good girl, a great friend to everyone, an unflaggingly hard worker, and a shining success. Parents put a lot of pressure on her to reflect well on them. They were poor, white, and Catholic. Her mom was a popular, outgoing elementary school teacher who bullied her kids when no one was around. She extracted the behavior, the obedience, and the respect she wanted through extortion. She held them in a constant threat of withdrawing her warmth and love, which she was famous for outside of the home. She was less than no help when my wife came of age. There was some violence. Dad enabled this, partly through long work hours away from the home, providing for the family. He was loving inside and outside the home, a totally great guy, according to everyone who met him. They still have that status, comfortably retired now, golfing and socializing every day, owning 5 cars, summering in Florida, the archetypal successful boomers. Notably, years of hard work and struggle barely kept them in the lower end of middle class, until Dad got laid off when the local industry giant began to crash, and he found success in commercial real estate later in life. So my wife's always torn between the person she actually is, and the person she's rewarded for being, by family, friends, and every job she's had, since she was 14. Boundaries are super difficult. She has a real good therapist now, and she's making big strides in reclaiming her identity from the expectations she adopted so early, which was really an adaptation to survive her family situation. Be the perfect daughter, and you'll avoid the consequences. She's unconventionally beautiful. She thinks I'm crazy, and has really struggled with weight and reproductive health, so consequently she's hounded with body image issues and shame. Since she wasn't perfect, she lived in constant fear anyway. Now she is a beautiful, loving mother, on a path to be CEO or COO of a progressive non-profit. She's trying not to unfairly compare herself to peers, to forgive herself for not already being more successful in family and work. She's trying to navigate life using the priorities of her more authentic self, instead of her fixated image self. I'm frustrated with some of the authoritarian, sniping parenting that she repeats with our amazing daughter, but I'm so proud of her for her personal growth, and how she's still rising to these challenges at 40 years old. Every day she does a better job, and she becomes a better version of herself, for herself and for us. I guess I should add that she's attracted to me, because I understand being damaged, because I'm uncontrollably angry about injustice, and because I'm handsome and tall. Probably also, now, because I'm a pretty good dad, which was surprising to everyone, including me. Unfortunately, I'm still a brooding misanthrope, stuck in my own maladaptive response to trauma and deprivation as a kid. I'm not a great husband. I have not been entirely good for her. I'm habitually miserable. I don't share her positive outlook, and frankly I drag her down about as much as I lift her up. Her family halfway hates me for all this, because I don't make her happy, because I don't subscribe to their conventional values, and because I've been, occasionally, very rude to her mother. I revealed my contempt despite efforts to maintain appearances and act appropriate, and it's caused real friction between my wife and me. Her mom and I just keep things polite and superficial, and we all try to keep us separated at gatherings. Sorry, honey. I love and adore and respect you, and I'm still trying to do better and find a way to make you happy. You're wonderful and you really deserve it. In 2018 Ira connected W, the most popular kid in school, now a 40-something-year-old man. He was the guy everyone liked. He was kind to everyone, and super good looking, played 3 or 4 sports, was the life of every party. We stayed together for one of the more miserable years of my life. He'd become a hardcore non-functioning alcoholic who only wanted to talk about the past, not just high school, and party. He would even pretend to smoke pot while video chatting his friends. As he descended further into his madness of alcoholism, he became extremely mentally and verbally abusive towards me. As a side note, he didn't drink for about 4 years before he got to me. He was actually not allowed to board his flight up to meet up me again because he got too drunk at the airport. It never stopped. I should point out he didn't work, and I paid for everything for the both of us on my money from Social Security disability. He had some really faked up, traumatic things happen in his past that he refused to seek therapy for, no matter how badly I begged him to do so, and he was jealous of everyone on the planet because they had it better than he. Oh, and he was a closet racist. Eventually I had the police come and escort him off my property when he just wouldn't faking leave. He even told the police I'd hit him. He ripped my earbuds out of my ear so hard that he tore one of them off, so I punched him in the shoulder. If we had still been dating, I would have been taken to jail for that one justified punch in the shoulder. Luckily we'd both told the cop we'd broken up 2 weeks prior. Anyway, he moved in a couple of mutual friends and proceeded to make their life hell for 1.5 years, like stealing their sheet and pawning it to buy alcohol and drugs, turning into a heroin addict and shooting up in the house, getting his ass kicked by multiple dealers in the area because he tried to rip them off, the couple being threatened and having to pay other drug dealers who he successfully ripped off. And going everywhere during the pandemic no mask. He eventually left while they were in the middle of evicting him. From what little I've heard, he's bounced between various friends and relatives, ripping them off and burning bridges everywhere. His 2 oldest nearest friends ended their friendships him and blocked him on FB during this before he could get to them and try to ruin their lives too. My husband and I are high school sweethearts. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary next week. In high school, he was part of the popular group. He had the house where the parties were, and their group was the group. To be in point, I wasn't a part of their group. I wasn't really a part of any group. I wasn't a nerd or anything. I was just there. I had my friends and that was that. We met junior year and got married at 22. Now, he's doing great. He was on the football team in high school, but now he powerlifts. He's even more good looking than he was in high school. He's friends with his high school best friend, but that's the only person either of us really talked to from high school. His old friend group isn't as successful, but he kinda fell into a really great opportunity which gave him the chance to work toward a really good job. I'm not going to lie, we've had some pretty bad bumps probably stemming from that need for attention he had back in high school, but we fought through and made it out the other side. He's my best friend. He's still cool, he's funny, and he's so much fun to be around. He's a good husband and he's a fantastic dad to our 2 boys. Out of all of the people he used to hang out with, he's the most successful. Sometimes I still get a little starstruck around him. I feel like he settled for me on my bad days, but we have a great life and we get along fantastically, and that's just my insecurities talking. When I met my wife, she was clearly way too cool for me. I'm an introvert. No friends, barely could talk to anybody. She was a girl who could have dressed up or put 0 effort into how she looked and still gotten whoever she wanted. We had a good 4 years together, and the last 2 or so she got into drugs really badly and became very mean. After she started hitting me and eventually trying to kill me by trying to slit my throat and strangle me, I left when I could. The first time I tried to leave, she held me hostage by stabbing me with my car key all over my body. I knew it was the drugs that were making her this way, but couldn't be around it, so I had to tell her if she cleaned up we could eventually talk about a future, and letting her see our daughter, now 5, was 3 when all this was happening. I'd really hoped that she would get clean and at least be able to see her daughter again, but she had some major health complications from injecting heroin and gave herself sepsis and blood clots, which eventually lead to a stroke and a long painful death just this past March, St. Patrick's Day, just 4 days before her 38th birthday. This story only scratches the ice with everything that has happened in these last few years with the drama she has caused me, and I haven't fully recovered mentally, but at least the nightmares have stopped. I do my best to give my daughter the best and happiest life that I can give her, and we have pretty good life and a lot going for us. Every day is kinda somber for me now, and there is a longing there that I'm not sure how to fill, but my daughter is a character. Us laughing together does a pretty good job of that. Not married or anything, but ran into the cool guy from high school a while back at our 10-year reunion. He was the dude that set the trends. He had contacts with bootleg music people, and we got all our cool music from him. He set the fashion trends, did the fancy dance moves at parties. He had all the girls. He was tall, blue-eyed, blonde curly hair. Women would look at him and spontaneously orgasm. Not really, but you get the drift. So my country had conscription 2 years soon as you turn 18. You go through some shit, gain a bit of muscle and discipline, and basically become a man. People scared of this would try various routes to try and get out of it. One such way was to join the armed forces permanently, not as a conscript. This is what he did. Apparently scared of boot camp. His chosen profession in the armed forces? Chef. Not fancy Gordon Ramsay sheet, mess hall for the troops sheet. Powdered eggs and stale bread he would rather face than running around and getting fit. So 10-year reunion swings around. I'm 8 years into my career. He's still a chef. Not for the army at least, but some corp. He cooks in their mess hall. Not saying that is bad. I can see people enjoying cooking for others, but this was definitely not him. But in his fear of physical exertion, he ran towards cooking in a corporate canteen. He was sitting with a beer glass full of Jack Daniels, telling me about the last 10 years, downed it and got another. I heard via the grapevine few years later that he had been driving home drunk. His car overheated for some reason, and in his drunkenness, decided that opening the radiator cap was a good idea. Superheated water and steam hit him in the face, and he has some facial scars to live with now, thanks to Mr. Jack Daniels. TLDR, being the cool person in high school means jack shit. I didn't marry one, but I was really surprised a few years ago at our 20th class reunion. I went to a small school in a small town. I think we had like 90 kids in our graduating class. A lot of those kids had been there their whole lives. Everyone not only knew everyone, but I had went to daycare with some of these people. This is also the kind of place that has a lot of those same people living within 20 miles of said small town in the same bars their parent lived in. We had a bonfire at one of the classmates' parents' house, same house she grew up in, and I had been to a bunch of times as we used to have bonfires there in high school. Lol. Anyways, I was one of the few that moved far away, but my parents' moving lined up with the same weekend as the reunion, so I went. I wouldn't have come back just for the reunion, but I was there, so shrugs shoulders. One of the more popular pretty girls got drunk, brought up how one of the dudes there had broken up with her in a note and starting dating one of the other girls immediately when we were in 8th grade. She wanted an apology from him. I'm like, wait, what? I thought she had to be joking. Most other people were laughing too, which only incensed her and made her more angry. Now, the other interesting thing is she's doing all of this in front of her husband, who she has like 4 kids with. His laughing about the whole ordeal is what pissed her off the most, I think. I had rode there with a friend who lives in the general area. I was like, what the hell is up with her? Who cares about a breakup 25 years ago? Friend said meltdown girl has serious self-esteem issues and is super neurotic, so she avoids her now. I was like, what the fuck? My parents were definitely in the popular crowd in our small town high school and started dating sophomore year. On my dad's 19th birthday, his father had a fatal heart attack. About a year later, my mom's parents were in a car accident. My grandma was killed instantly, and my grandpa was on life support for 2 months before they pulled the plug. My parents were both in college. My mom was the oldest of 4 kids, the youngest being in middle school at the time. Both worked multiple jobs while going to school, raising my mom's siblings, and running my mom's family farm. They got real poor, real quick, having to sell my grandpa's guns and handmade furniture just to keep the heat and lights on for a little while longer. With the help of most of my mom's extended family, and the opposite of help from a few that stole some farm equipment, and a tight-knit community, they made it through. Mom became a successful programmer / project manager for a craft / Oscar Mayer, and dad dropped out of college his senior year to farm full-time. Mom is still a popular girl, being overly active in the community and still goes out with her high school friend group. Dad became very active in local politics, being town chairman, and helped found and act as president of our fire district for close to 20 years before passing the torch on. He claims he hates everybody, but at any given time there is likely some neighbor sitting in his shop stealing a pop or a beer from the shop fridge. that he always keeps stocked with brands dad doesn't drink, and bullshitting with him as he tries to work. Now they're both slowly easing into retirement, enjoying spending time with their grandkids, traveling, and discovering hobbies that will keep them busy and active for the rest of their years. Side note, some of my grandpa's guns and furniture have shown back up over the years. Some of it was purchased back as estate auctions, other stuff was just given back after 30 plus years. One of his guns, an old .300, was given back to them, and my brother was able to harvest a buck with it. My parents met in 9th grade. At age 14 they became friends and eventually fell in love. My dad was really popular with girls, especially, and my mum was worth the guy, so everyone wanted them, but they only wanted each other. My mum gave up an Ivy League level opportunity to go to England to study at one of the most prestigious schools there, all expenses paid, and a full ride for school. She chose to stay in our small town on the Atlantic coast to build a family with my dad. She ended up going to a good university with a full ride here, and is now a competitive dancer, and she knows several kinds. Dance with a partner, a highly successful medical physicist who basically runs her wing of the hospital, and a committed mom of 3+. My older brother's fiance who came to live with us when her home situation broke down, and that was only a couple months into their relationship. My mum welcomed her into our home without question. My friends all say she's like a Disney princess. She always wears pretty dresses and elaborately braids her hair. She doesn't wear skin up, but everyone thinks she does. She's in her 40s and still gets asked for her ID when buying alcohol and gets hit on in random places like the grocery store. She has run a fundraiser to get my school a new playground. It was in the news and everything. She ended up building the school a bunch of new equipment and an outdoor learning garden. Did I mention she is friends with literally everyone in City Hall? Like all the mayors from the past decade? Everyone wants to be around her because she is the most kind person you will ever meet. But bottom line is, 20 something years later, my parents are still happily married. My dad was very popular growing up, but not the preppy popular. He mainly just smoked weed, shot guns, and threw parties. He pretty much just works 60-hour weeks now and is killing himself with alcohol daily at the age of 55. He has copped, but no longer smokes, which really improved his health. Go figure. Why mom was infamous as a bitch you don't fuck with. Almost a butch, redheaded, and mean as hell if you pissed her off type of person. She was extremely popular and the go-to person when you needed someone's ass kicked. Somehow that made her popular and cool. I guess she didn't fuck with people that didn't need to be faked with. She still has a hot streak to this day. She is very physical. I watched her break my dad's elbow with an ashtray once. Also saw her throw a glass table at him, throw a glass plate at someone's face. She broke my arm by jabbing me with a stool. She was like a very angry brick wall. Growing up, talking to her was like talking to a brick wall, and fighting her was like fighting a brick wall. You never win in any situation. There is no reason. They once threw a party where, apparently, over 500 plus people came from all the surrounding schools. People were jumping off the roofs of the house, climbing the near billboard drunk as fuck, and the next morning apparently the street was filled with people passed out from the party. Apparently at this part, a biker gang showed up and beefed with a rival gang. Gunshots happened. The fire department and police were both called over multiple things. Sounds crazy to me. While I didn't witness this, it's a very known party that they didn't just make up to sound cool. Lol. I can ask any family member that was alive. I can ask friends of family members. I've even heard people I've never personally met before that knew my parents mention it to my parents. Lol. This party was apparently the highlight of the whole city for that year. It still gets mentioned, and it was over 30 years ago, so there's that point, and that was my parents' legacy. They became the cool kids that threw the biggest party the town has ever seen. My mom and dad grew up in a shitty neighborhood, but my dad was super popular, amazing at any sport he did, not very school smart, but everyone knew him, and nobody faked with him, because he could fight like a MF and basically never lost if he wasn't drunk. My mom was super popular as well. Every boy wanted her, but she was outgoing enough to have everyone want to be her friend, and reserved enough that she did not sleep around. They got together at a party once later on once they were in their 20s and stayed together for 17 years. At first it would seem that they didn't peak in high school as my dad made a multi-million-dollar business, had 2 of his own kids, and 1 he made his own. 1 was from my mum's previous boyfriend, had a huge beautiful house on an acreage with 2 dogs and a few kitties, and 2 horses. My life was like one of those American dreams, but in Canada with a native dad and a white mom. They were still pretty ghetto, but it was in all the right ways, and at the right time. My dad had a brother who is a crack addict and often went MIA, and one time in particular he had to go find in Winnipeg, Native Central, so my dad went off to go looking for him in the seedier parts of Winnipeg. If you've ever been there you know the whole thing isn't so cash money, so the bad parts are really bad. He found a guy who had seen him, and he was led to a crack house where the guy made my dad do a hit of crack to make sure he wasn't a cop. That was it. Slowly but surely my entire life started falling apart. My dad was hooked from his first hoot, came home and was very high functioning for a crack addict until he wasn't. We lost everything, our home, our stuff as our house flooded during us being kicked out, bankruptcy. 5 years later, we really only had each other, but we didn't know what had happened yet. We moved to another town and started renting a beautiful acreage house, and my dad started working out of town. 6 months later we lost that house. My mom broke up with my dad and we were homeless. My mom took us to her cousins and we were able to stay there until my mom figured something out. 2 years later my dad had got sober and told us what happened, and it broke my mom. My dad now is doing amazing for himself. He found happiness doing the 12-step program and doesn't need a lot of money to fill what he thought he was missing. My mom hasn't done so amazing as he was her whole world, and she is now also going through the 12 steps as a design for loving and healing, because my little sister and I began the 12 steps and it's already changed our lives mentality wise. She wants to be healed so she can move on, and she's doing way better than she was a year ago. I'm proud of my whole family and grateful everything happened the way it did, as I wouldn't have my priorities straight. I had anger issues, and once I started the program it was like I was instantly a new person. I don't need money, stuff or different places. I need my family, and that always makes me happy now. I'm 19 and could not and have not ever been happier, and I'm happy I have a way healthier mentality, so I will be able to deal with the difficult in the future rather than say why me. Also following my Aboriginal roots, which is a big help as I love my history. My dad was the popular guy. He was a star baseball player like my papa who almost went pro. All the girls wanted him, everyone wanted to be his friend. My grandma was mentally ill, diagnosed bipolar, was one of the first children to survive some illness when she was little, which possibly led to her mental issues. She wore dentures. Since she was a child, the medication she took when she was little was so strong her teeth fell out. My grandpa eventually couldn't deal with it and left her for another woman across the country when my father was still quite young, which forced him to be the caretaker of any remaining kids and his mom. My grandma then had 3 suicide attempts. My dad was abandoned, then had to deal with my grandma's suicide attempts. A lot of trauma happened around that time. After school my dad worked as a garbage truck guy who thought it was normal to get so excited it's a Friday that he'd cut himself with a bottle. It wasn't normal. He worked as a bouncer, and that's where he met my mother. He let her in, even though she was 19, because they were flirting. He actually went to high school with my mom, who was a selective mutual through school. They dated for a little while but broke up. During the breakup my mom found out she was pregnant with my brother, so they did what you did back then and got married. My mother and brother almost died. When she was giving birth she had such a high fever her hair fell out. My brother had some kind of herpes on his forehead. It was a whole thing. More trauma point now from my memories. Their relationship wasn't great. Good times were great, bad times were awful. My father was clearly mentally ill, refusing to get help. As we became teenagers my father and brother would get into big fights, hurt each other. I'd get in between to stop it. I'd get hurt. It wasn't good. My mom started talking to someone at her work. I don't know how far that talking went. My dad found out and showed up at their work trying to fight him or something. The building went into lockdown. Police just convinced him to go home. Soon after that my mother and I left, and I didn't talk to my father for 5 years. He eventually pushed my sister away, who did the same, and then his extended family. My brother stayed until he moved in with his friend. My dad was left alone. He figured out the anger wasn't working, I guess, because he still hasn't gotten help, but he has changed. No more anger behind his eyes, only sadness and regret. My sister and I have started bonding with him again. I broke up with my high school sweetheart after a year and a half off basically being with a woman instead of a man. Someone who never wanted to do anything with me ever. It was my first day of senior year. I had a sheet day, so I asked him to stop by on his way home from work for a hug. Just one hug was all I wanted. Hours go by, and he isn't texting me, but I now have seen him drive by my location 3 different times. He finally responded and said he was showing his truck to someone who was going to buy it. Then he said he would come over. He lived 1 mile away from my location. Another hour goes by, and he says he's going to come over after the party was over for his friend's sister. I'm sorry. Someone's birthday party for a grown-ass adult is more important than your sad girlfriend who's been waiting for you to give her a hug. I told him not to bother, because I would be home before then, and he would have the chance to. So on the drive home I talked with my dad, and he said why put up with someone who can't even stop for 5 minutes, even if he was busy to give you a single hug. So I wrote out the words "I'm done, I think we should break up" on my phone, and sent it immediately without a second thought. Now that was the most ironic moment I've ever seen from him. For months I had been asking him to move in with me, because I had my own house. He suddenly wanted to move in. I started going to church, and asked him to join me. He suddenly wanted me to go with him. He, the atheist he supposedly was, wanted me to go with him? Right. Not happening. He asked for 7 days for me to be shown he loved me. I didn't make it past day 2, and I couldn't stand it. I officially ended it. Said to myself I was going to be a hoe, since I was freshly back on the market. I tried some old ones who tried to hit me up while I was with him, but they didn't work out. But I found this cowboy who worked for the railroad, which just so happened to be next to my ranch. I saw it on Snapchat and asked him what he was doing, since my land was on the opposite side of the fence. One thing led to another. He came over for a one-night stand, but a pipe under my house busted literally the hour before he showed up. I'm a complete mess covered in mud when he shows up. I first saw him in person, and it was like the breath was taken from me. I couldn't help but feel childish because he was so attractive. My youngest brother and sister were there helping me as well, and my dad also showed up with the things to fix the pipe. So this gorgeous man climbed under my house with those things and fixed the pipes and met my entire family basically. After they all left, I went outside to the pump house and turned the water on so I could shower and get cleaned up. I was met by this gorgeous cowboy walking towards me with the sun going down and the glow on us. He lifted me up, cradled in his arms, and the most fairy tale kiss I've ever had was given to me. I literally felt like a princess that got lifted off her feet by her knight in shining armor. But this knight was in blue jeans and boots. So we went on to continue what we had originally planned for that evening, and one night stand turned into a best relationship I've ever had. That one night led to a best friend, 2 beautiful children, a house, and the most perfect dream come true. So my actual high school sweetheart was a bussy, and I upgraded to a whole man. This man who loves me unconditionally and wouldn't dream of ever hurting me or leaving me high and dry. My soulmate. My dad was a cool guy. He left his tiny village in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, Bangladesh. He was one of the first people from the country, as well as the first from his village, to go to Dubai for work. He brought the small village money. He built an entire large school for the children, a mosque for cleanly prayer, a bazaar/shopping district, running water, electricity point as for the spouse who married him. She married him before all of this. He was very personable. He loved talking to people, a real businessman. Until years and years of dealing with a manipulative, gaslighting, abusive pose. She talked all this shit about my husband, is so handsome and cool. He died 3 years ago, but even before then, he couldn't look at me because I look like her. My mom convinced everyone, even her kids, that my dad was the abusive one. Her evidence? His outbursts and reactions to the horrible things she whispered to him. And then when he reacted and said things like, "No, you are the failure. You are a bad parent." People were like, why is he saying that to her? Without knowing, she said it to him before bed every day for 40 years. I didn't realize what she was doing until he died, and she turned all that energy onto me, calling me fat and worthless, saying I'm a hoe because I got sexually assaulted multiple times as a child due to her negligence. I was too friendly as a child and that's why people touched me like that. But to others, I'm my amazing daughter who can sing amazingly. She is so talented in business. And then whenever I react angrily over the 100th comment of the day, my brothers start with why are you yelling at her like dad did. No one ever stands up for me though. No one ever asks her why she tells me I'm going to die alone. No one asks her why she says no one will ever love me. That's what happens when you date the cool guy for status. We are not married, but I wanted to respond just because there's still a very big change in both of our personalities since high school. Anyways, back in high school before my boyfriend and I started dating, I was going through this dark phase where I listened to a lot of rock bands and was having a really hard time with my mental health. This was before I was diagnosed with OCD. He was this guy who hung out with a lot of the popular guys in our grade. So I had always assumed he was one of those stuck-up snobbish people that only talk to you if you were in his friend group. I was just this lonely girl who spent all of her time in the art room and even hid in the bathroom on many occasions to avoid people. I was so intimidated by him. Almost 2 years after we graduated, I went up to Starbucks after a breakup and found him working there. It caught me so off guard that I literally almost ran out, and then I didn't even go back up there until a month later. When I finally went back, my crush on him came back, so I started going up to Starbucks nearly every day. I spent well over $500 on coffee because I didn't have the confidence to talk to him unless I was ordering coffee. After about 5 months of going up there nearly every day to see him and never once having an actual conversation with him, he finally asked to sit with me one night once his shift had ended. We talked for about an hour, and we found out we actually had a lot in common. We exchanged numbers, and we talked every day for a week, before we went on what I would consider our first date. We sat and talked for hours, and we found out that we have so much in common. At the end of the date, he gave me the sweetest note and asked me to be his girlfriend. We are still dating almost a year and a half later, and he's the complete opposite of a stuck-up snob that I had originally thought he was back in high school. He's actually a huge nerd and one of the goofiest people I've ever met. He also has one of the biggest hearts of anyone I've ever known either, and he has so much patience with me. There was even one time I told him about a traumatic experience that I had, and he just sat and cried with me and told me that I didn't deserve to go through something like that. Don't judge a book by its cover, everyone. Love this thread. I was a major dork in school and really shy/awkward, but my husband was popular and dated the most popular girl in school. Apparently she was the worst kisser in the world, lol. He went into the military immediately after graduating. Then I went to school in a foreign country. We actually may have crossed paths while this happened. We also went to a lot of the same concerts in the town we lived in before we met. We grew up only about 20 miles from each other. A few years ago, we met online and we immediately knew this was it. We bonded over our love of traveling and cartoons, but he also wrote me the longest nicest text messages, and still does. I have always been very introverted and never hung out with people too much, but we went on 3 dates in one weekend. I think he's a very considerate, loving, and wonderful man. Although, we talk about it a lot, because going into the military changed him a lot as a person, and I don't know that if he just stayed in the town where he grew up, if we would have started dating. Also, my mom's brother was ultra popular, and she was a major burnout/freak. One time I asked him what she was like when she was young, and he said your mom was a badass, she was high all the time. She was super cool but not popular, though she always dated musicians. Eventually her best friend started working for Who's Aircraft, and she said there was this really weird guy my mom needed to meet. She couldn't believe how weird this guy was. Turns out the weird geeky guy was my dad. Mom said she thought she would marry a rock star, but then she married my dad, a chemical engineer who gave her a really amazing life, probably even more extravagant than a struggling musician would have. My uncle ended up marrying his high school sweetheart, who was the most popular cheerleader in school. She cheated on him at every turn and she's been married 4 times now. Also, she's really fat now. He never grew up and still lives in the same place slash never got married again or anything. For all his popularity, it didn't really do much for him, although I would say he is fun. His kid from his first marriage is an absolute loser, though. My wife and I are high school sweethearts and have been married for about 17 years now. For the most part we are still very much the same. Physically we are both more attractive and emotionally we definitely have grown up, but have same personalities. She was the hottie, county fair queen, in gymnastics, super flexible, in choir, has an amazing voice, and was a band geek. I was the geeky nerd that was super skinny. I was under 100 pounds into my 20s, pimples, glasses, and braces. Being smart was probably just my only good quality. Lol. We just happened to hang out with the same group of friends. Knew her through sophomore and junior year. Senior year we were going to our homecoming dance and both our dates cancelled on us. So we decided to go with each other. Had so much fun that we started dated, and the rest is history. We went to college together. Those were our rough times, where we had a lot of growing up to do. But we got through it together, and learned to work as a team. Fast forward. She is still an amazing person, works very hard, at one point going to school full time, and working while raising 2 kids and pregnant as a single parent, while I was on deployment. She is an amazing wife and mother. I definitely changed quite a bit. I joined the military, got eye surgery, lost my braces, and am now at a very healthy weight. I've also done fairly well in my career myself as well. My dad was a cool guy during his high and college, had pretty girls swooning over him and everything, and well he was good in academics too, so had sort of a perfect life. Also he was the only kid of my grandparents who lived in the city with my grandfather. My grandfather suddenly got ill, his health kept declining, and he had to retire from his well-paying job earlier than he was supposed to. He got the opportunity to give the job to one of their sons. He gave the job to the other son. My dad was very disappointed, since he had to drop his degree in between, and he had to work some small jobs for the family, since his brother was gonna get the job a year later. My uncle was minor, and used to drink and gamble. My grandpa died the same year, got married to my mom 2 years later. Well, she was the perfect homemaker. So everything started getting back in place. Now my father is kinda boring and introverted. I think it's because of all he had to face at an early age. But rarely dresses up or does self-care things. He says the quarantine has made him lazy. So I agree to that too. But all in all my uncle kinda cheated on him for the job. And since my father is the eldest he forgave him. And I think that had him depressed for some years. But since my mom had started dressing up and doing self-care he's also started doing it. So feels nice to him doing things he did 5 years back, before. My uncle got into an accident that distorted his face for life and he can't eat food. I have a high school sweetheart. I've been with my love for approximately 12 years going on 13. We had a rough relationship. Being one of the cool kids in school I didn't put her in my first priority, and my love being so shy, innocent and fragile. Could have never understood why she laid eyes on me. Having this bad reputation not with girls, but as a person. I was a selfish person always looking to better myself. The day I meet her was by my friend. He asked me, bro, what do you think about that one girl over there? I said, which one, the skinny one over there? He said yes. Well, she's not that bad. I told him, let me see her face and then I'll let you know for sure. When the bell rang, so we can go to class, I saw her face. She blew my mind away. My heartbeat went from 0-100 real quick. It was like love at first sight. Weird but true. I low-key stalked her and followed her to her class. Funny thing was that she had class right next to me and I never even paid attention. From that moment on my priority to catch her attention was number #1. Long story short, I asked for her number and we started talking and we got together. Time passed by and we ended up with our first child at a very young age. I knew what I had to do. Leave my old life behind and fight for my new family and thrive for them. I tried to go to college, but truly school isn't for everyone, especially when you have a time bomb on your hands. 1 year of Santa Monica College, I said I quit. I need a job. I need something to provide for my kid and wife. So I started working in a shipping and receiving company that lasted 3 years and nothing but money issues. I was about to give up and call it quits. I was enough of a man to sustain my family and the love of my life. But I couldn't give up that fast, so I got a security job. Started at 8 to 4:30 at my shipping and receiving job. After that I had a 1-hour gap to go home, change, eat, and leave to my other job that started at 5:30 to 12 o'clock. Man, I was doing great till my body started giving up. Sleeping in the car and the job performance in job was getting sloppy. I started to pick her anxiety and anger issues. I hate life. I wanted to kill myself because I wasn't worthy of being a father and a partner. But the love of my love said, I don't need nothing, babe. One day all the hard work will pay off. So she picked up my motivation. She helped me believe in myself and motivated me to pursue something better for us. I was full of dreams, but not a single one of them could get reached. Until I came into a new opportunity and then I blew up like dynamite. She connected me with her older brother, got her okay job, learned new set of skills, pushed myself to be the best at it, and I did. I remembered I set a goal for myself, which was, when I turned 28 I was gonna be winning that type of money. Incredibly, I ended up reaching my goal 1 year earlier than what I could imagine. After that everything was all up to be. My wifey had so much hope in me that I felt invisible. I did take life-changing decisions that I could have risked our future, but things went great until this day. I fought for what I loved, and I learned you can achieve anything in life if someone out there has hope for you. It's been 12 crazy years of my life, but the best roller coaster I ever been on, all thanks to you, babe. I would fight to the end for you and do anything for you too, my love. And for all those haters that told me high school sweethearts don't last, well, fuck you, cause we did, and we still are. The problem is, everyone's definition of cool kid depends on the school and personal interpretation of what it means to be cool. Point, and the reality is, regardless of socioeconomic group, demographics or geographic location, each group of students will have a cool kid. Well, depending on what you think is cool, it's an interesting study to see what happened to a defined set of cool kids post-graduation, and I wonder if such a study has already been done. What is the definition of success, and what happens at 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years post-graduation? Think about it. You could go to the most dangerous, drug-addled part of town, and in that school, there will be a cool kid, and depending on the definition of cool, it could be the loudmouthed jerk who has many friends, or it could be the editor of the paper and school valedictorian. One could also go to the most private and elite school in Switzerland and find the cool kid. Each student will have their own specific challenges predetermined by the socioeconomic group they were born into, regardless of being cool. And wouldn't it be really sad if how popular or successful one was in high school predetermined one's success in life? We are still developing into adults in high school. Hence, young adult is applied. Point, who we become, what we grow up into, and how successful we become is determined every single faking day by our daily habits and choices we make. There is no the story is over until we breathe our last breath. Have hope and be optimistic and have faith you will turn out great and make the choices that will help you in life. Life is circuitous. That means it's not a straight line. Life is filled with failures that lead to success, so to take a single snapshot in anyone's life and say this is the epitome and representation of the full breadth and width of their achievements in their life is utter nonsense. As much as we want to see a pattern here, it will be hard to find one. We are humans, fallible and also capable of great hope and wonderful actions. It's not yet the end of the road, which means today is another day to live in a great way, regardless of our backgrounds or mistakes we have made. Neither of us were what you'd call cool people. We were in band together and didn't talk to each other. I was friends with her sister and always thought she was hot. The only time we interacted back then was when I did something dumb and she thought I was funny. I was flattered because I always thought that she was hot as hell. Point, we met one another on 3 separate occasions after high school before the 4th time when we hooked up. I'm still dumbfounded that I won this awesome chick that I've crushed on since high school. Point, we were both involved in an activist organization and were going through similar situations involving ourselves at the time. We briefly discussed our respective situations over Facebook, and she gave me advice. I didn't see or hear from her until the next time we met, as we weren't actually friends on Facebook. 2.5 years later we both stood up at her sister's wedding. I've always been terrified of women and my so was there, so I didn't speak to her months. Before we hooked up she came with her then fiance, the one I'd eventually win her from, a jerk, to a mutual friend's, the one that would eventually hook us up, house. I was playing their guitar and was secretly trying to impress her. She'd later tell me how hot she thought I was that night. The next time we hooked up, and I told her that she should break up with Jude and be with me, so she texted him, dumped him, and we've been together ever since. Married for 4 years now. It's still insane to me that we were in such close proximity for so many years yet never dated. I frequently tell her how dumbfounded I still am that I won her and that she's still a dream come true. We've been together for 6.5 years, and we still laugh hours off together daily and have fun, just like it was still the first few months. She has always been an incredible stepmother, previously mentioned, so is the BM of my daughter. She has never put effort in, and we have a son together. I could never ask for a better wife. Seriously. Every time I think about it, I'm dumbfounded. Sorry, doesn't answer your question, and is sappy as hell. But I still think it's a cool story. My mom is 4 years younger than my dad. They went to the same high school. Dad was the very popular senior who also was a ladies' man, and mom was the shy and beautiful 9th grader that every boy had a crush on. They got acquaintances on a school trip and '86 when my mom was a senior and my dad was in college. My maternal grandpa thought of dad as a milksop and my paternal grandmother was never fond of mom, yet they got married in 1990 and had my sister a year after and me later on. I always thought that my parents' relationship had such a beautiful history, but about 3 years ago mom and me had accidentally caught dad cheating and things rapidly went south ever since. I found out from mom that their relationship had always been really toxic and passive aggressive. Dad always wanted that things be done in his way and would always take credit for mom's work, not to mention that he was double-faced, manipulative, and selfish. He was barely involved during my sister's toddlerhood and would always punish me or give me weeks of silent treatment out of childish reasons. The reason why mom hadn't ever left him was because of his insisting for them to remain a unit and because she thought that this was the price for unconditional love. Now they are getting a divorce because dad swore to his mistress that he would leave us for her. Also trying to win her the exact same way he did with mom, and mom is a complete nervous wreck because of various reasons, financial, emotional, physical, etc. I really do hope that karma will eventually catch up to him. TLDR, my parents were high school sweethearts, got married for 30 years, and then got divorced because of my dad's infidelity and toxicity, leaving behind 3 traumatized nervous wrecks. Edited to fix typo. Brenda and Eddie were the popular studies and the king and the queen of the prom, riding around with the car top down and the radio on. Nobody looked any finer or was more of a hit at the Parkway Diner. We never knew we could want more than that out of life. Surely Brenda and Eddie would always know how to survive. Brenda and Eddie were still going steady in the summer of '75 when they decided the marriage would be at the end of July. Everyone said they were crazy. Brenda, you know you're much too lazy. Eddie could never afford to live that kind of life. But there we were, waving Brenda and Eddie goodbye. They got an apartment with deep pile carpet and a couple of paintings from Sears, a big waterbed that they bought with the bread they had saved for a couple of years. They started to fight when the money got tight, and they just didn't count on the tears. They lived for a while in a very nice style, but it's always the same. In the end they got a divorce as a matter of course, and they parted the closest of friends. Then the king and the queen went back to the green, but you can never go back there again. Brenda and Eddie had had it already by the summer of '75. From the high to the low to the end of the show. For the rest of their lives they couldn't go back to the grease, as the best they could do was pick up the pieces. We always knew they would both find a way to get by. That's all I heard about Brenda and Eddie. Can't tell you more than I told you already, and here we are waving Brenda and Eddie goodbye.